Yes, yes, another installment. Well, not another installment. Just me going live again. Just me going live. Hey, everyone, RT Bear here. How are you? I hope everyone's doing well. We are going to do something a little different today. We are going to do a million questions with Clint Helinski. Clint's coming in here, and he kidded the other day on a live stream, and he said he's got a million questions for me. And I said, "You got a million questions for me? Let's do it like a game show. Let's rapid fire these suckers and throw them at me, and I'll try my best to answer them." So it's not going to happen. We're going to try to do a million questions. He says he's got a million questions, so we'll see. We'll see how that goes. Hey, Linkovich, what's up, my friend? Tatooini, what's up, guys? Good to see you. And yeah, so I'm going to get Clint in here in a bit. But I just wanted to kind of hang out a little bit and just say good morning to everyone and see how everyone's doing, and then get Clint in here. Let me see. I got to send him an invite. Here it is. Here it is. He's getting the invite. Yes. All right. We got Shadowhawk in here now. Hail Lone Star Artie Bear. Yes, yes. Texas is gorgeous. Texas is gorgeous. People here don't want me to tell you anymore that Texas is gorgeous. They don't want any more people here, even though it's a big state. Thank you so much for the 207. I do appreciate that, Leroy. What's up, Billy Basco? Good morning, Art. My first time getting to catch you live on your channel. Oh, good. This will be fun because this is going to be a bit of a game show scenario. Hey, Emmett, what's up? Hello, everyone. We got the real Steve Dye, not the fake one, but the real Steve Dye. That's like a Hollywood name, Steve Dye. Actually, it's like like an old school radio name. Hi, I'm Steve Dye. Coming to you on KW whatever, KW Shack. Billy says, good morning, Leroy. So there's a little bit of interaction. That's always good. Peyton Holden, I like your icon. Is that somebody's butt hanging out of their jeans there? I don't know who that person would be. May I ask a question? Of course. As soon as you ask the question, I'll get Clint in here. Mr. K, what's up? Yes, you may, Mr. Peyton, or May Peyton. All right, where is it? Where is it? Where is it, Peyton? Where's the question? Oh my gosh, everybody's waiting for the question. Well, while we're waiting, I'm gonna change my mind. I'm gonna bring Clint in here. Hey, Clint, what is up, my friend?
Hey, everybody. Hey, how's it going?
Good, good. Good morning, my friend.
Good morning.
Yeah, so Peyton had a question for us, and now he's playing coy. He's not giving the question.
You could play the meme. May I ask a question? You just did. Well, can I ask another question? You just did. Can I ask two more questions?
And so on and so on. This could go on forever. Yeah, 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 exactly. So you doing good? Doing good, my friend?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it's warmed up here, 37 degrees and sunshine. So it's pretty much spring. We're happy.
Okay, so 35 and under is freezing, right?
32 or right around there. Yeah. There's still ice and stuff, but I mean, the sun is shining and it's not 20 below like it was 2 weeks ago. So I'm happy.
Yeah, we had a few 35 and under, and I think that's when you got to kind of drip the faucets and you got to take some precautions overnight so you don't have frozen pipes.
Yep, definitely. But yeah, this is nice weather. I can go outside in my shorts and t-shirt again. So
yeah,
I'm happy.
You gonna rub that tanning lotion on you?
Oh yeah, I don't want to burn too early in March.
Yeah, that sun's gonna be a little intense after the cold snap.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've never had to deal with this weather before, so it's unique.
Yeah, it had to be a culture shock for you.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it, but I think if I had to deal with it on a regular basis, I don't think I'd be too happy about it. So
No, it helps growing up in it because then you just don't know any better.
yeah. But just shoveling a driveway full of snow and stuff like that, that doesn't sound very attractive.
It wears you out fast. And then there's this like spot in your lower back that just starts to like, shoot through your entire body. And yeah, it's no joke.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
No, I mean, it is a joke. It is a joke when you choose to do
that. It's no joke. Stop laughing, Art. Insensitive fuck. All right, man. Well, this started. We had you and Mark Polton on, I think, last week. And then you kept saying, Art, I got a million questions for you. Art, I got a million questions for you. And I said, okay, well, let's do it like a game show. And then you called my bluff and you said, okay. I said, you can actually prepare a million questions. And then you said, yeah, I think I can come up with a million questions. So
a million might have been high.
Well, the thing is, we're never going to get that far. So
No.
It's a goal. Okay, you have to set goals in life, right?
Definitely.
Okay, and you work towards them. Some of them, you're never going to get to. Some of them might take your whole life.
Yeah.
So we may do this for the next 10 years, Clint.
Well, I came up with 30 questions to start out with that I thought would kind of touch on a lot of bases. I think that are my stuff that I would like to know about.
Well, didn't we do that? Yeah, we did something like if it took me 2 minutes per question, that would be an hour if you had 30 questions.
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I could ask you right there, how many times have you had to explain to people how to pronounce your last name?
It's an ongoing, it never ends. But at this point, it's just it's fun because it's a conversation starter.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Say your name. Oh, and then you explain it and I go, oh, that's like French. It's like, yeah, my parents French Canadian. But for me, growing up, it was Thibert or Thibert, or what was it? It was Thibert or Thibert.
Thibert, yeah.
Yeah. And so then I was in school. I was taking German. I don't know why, but the teacher was taking roll the first day and said Art Thibert. And I was looking around like, who is that? And then my friend was like, I think that's you. And so after the class, she explained, she goes, I think it's French. I think it's Thibert. And so I go home, I tell my dad, I go, is our last name Thibert? And he goes, yeah. And then he just walked away. Because we had never ever, I never remember my parents correcting anybody.
Yeah.
All my life. Up to high school, I was probably a junior in high school, and I had this revelation that, that's not how you say our last name.
I suppose there's just a certain point where everybody's mispronouncing it, and it's like, I'm not going to waste my time correcting them, kind of.
Yeah, just go with
I get Helsinki a lot with Helsinki.
Okay.
So I get Helsinki, but Helsinki is, what is Helsinki? Or no. Trying to think. Oh, I forgot where Helsinki is. Is it Finland? Poland?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember, but yeah, I get that a lot. So
yeah, my wife actually, strangely, her name just Pamela, especially in California, it's like Pamela, like the Hispanic, like the accent and stuff.
Oh, with the L and the A at the end.
Yeah,
the ELA. There's a different pronunciation.
Yeah, it's cute. I like it. But going into, I did a couple shows in Canada and Quebec, like the more like east, like French, part of Canada, and everybody just went right into it. I checked in a hotel and they were like, "Oh, Mr. and Mrs. Thibert," and I was like,
yeah, there you go.
How did that happen? I didn't have to correct you. I didn't have to, do anything.
See, I'm not even getting my question list, and that just brought up another question for me that you might know. Is it Travis Charest or Travis Charest?
I've heard it both ways. Yeah, so
is he French Canadian also?
I don't know.
Because that seems like a French Canadian name.
Yeah, Tress. Yeah. I've heard it both ways, but I haven't heard it in any official way.
Right.
I met Travis, but the conversation never came up, and nobody was calling him by his last name. And then I've never heard any credible people say it. You know what I mean? So I don't know what the official pronunciation. Like Bill Sienkiewicz, like Bill told me how to say his last name.
Yeah, there's one that I'm sure a lot of people had questions about before.
Even phonetically, it doesn't work.
No, that doesn't. Those letters don't make that sound in that order.
His last name looks like just a bunch of letters, like this thrown together. It doesn't even look like there was any kind of rhyme or reason to it.
Throughout the Scrabble tiles and bingo.
The Scrabble tile name. Yeah. So anyway, man, we had a ball. I think you and I talked about an hour after the show, or maybe longer, and just had a good time hanging out. So I thought this would be a lot of fun, just doing something like this, because you're pretty fun and laid back. So we should get into a little bit of promotion first and foremost.
Always.
Yes, because you do have a campaign, and I do want to shed some light on it. So I have a tab here. Let me share it, and then you can go into explaining what the brand new killer campaign is all about.
Much appreciated.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, so this is Seadog and Codename Killswitch Book 2.
Book 2.
14. You guys are right on the precipice of 15.
Yeah, we're edging closer to that 15,000. We've got a stretch goal at 15,000, where everybody gets a nice swimsuit print of our two characters, our two leading ladies, Neon and Rebel.
Oh, hold on. Let me find that real quick. At the bottom of your page. Let me find that. So since you're talking about it, that's the first one. This is the one you're talking about, right?
Let's see. I don't have anything popping up yet.
Uh-oh. I think it's up on the screen. I just checked.
Let's see. I just see you and me. Or you and I.
This is really odd. Hold on for a sec.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, let me do this again. It was showing that it was there. Share. Now can you see it?
Yep, bingo. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. Yeah,
no.
here's the pinup. This is the one that at 15K everybody will get, right?
Yep, exactly. The Neon sitting on Crotch Rocket's motorcycle with Rebel showing off her new lovely bikini top there. So.
And what about the bikini bottom that the other one's showing off?
Exactly. I think the line, if I remember how I wrote, Neon's asking if Crotch Rocket will mind her sitting on his bike, and Rebel tells her to just keep holding that pose, and Crotch Rocket will let her sit on anything she wants to. So.
Oh my goodness! I don't know what that's all about.
Nah.
At all. Yeah.
Little good girl art out there for some fun.
Yeah, it definitely. And so this will be everybody's absolutely free once you hit 15K.
Yep, every backer will be getting that print. We already hit the 10K print where you're getting a swimsuit print of Neon right there, bingo. So every backer is already getting that one, and then we're just a few bucks away from getting the second print out there. So throwing in some nice, fun stretch goals for everybody as the campaign kind of comes to a close here in the next couple weeks.
Yeah. So that's always nice. It's always nice to have that. And it's kind of a cool callback to the Marvel swimsuit. And your whole campaign is kind of based on, mid-90s, kind of early mid-90s superhero comic stuff. So this is a killer tribute, just concept in general. And then there's Seadog.
Seadog is kind of a beast of his own. He's like my codename Killswitch is definitely an homage to the the type of comics I grew up on: Wildcats, Cyberforce, the X-Men, all that kind of stuff, Youngblood. Sea Dog is a creation by Mark and his son. And I think it started out mostly as his son's idea. He loved the Dogman character, so they co-created Sea Dog. And when Mark presented me with the idea for Sea Dog, and I already had my characters, I kind of thought Mark would come up with something more along the lines of Graveyard Shift. So that's kind of where my thinking was. And then I got Sea Dog, and that was a little bit of a curveball for me, but it actually ended up being like a real nice twist and a fun combo between my team and his superhero dog. So they kind of play off of each other in a fun way that, doesn't take things too seriously, but still kind of makes for a fun comic book adventure. I mean, I kind of put it back to the old like Marvel team ups books is kind of the feel that we've got for it. The team and Sea Dog kind of teaming up to fight this big bad villain that has abducted Sea Dog's original master, Peter. So that's kind of where our story starts out from.
Right. I think it's one of those strange combinations that really does work. But if you like on paper, if somebody just pitched it to you, you go, well, I'm not so sure. But the way your artwork and the way the story is constructed, I think it really works, man. It's like peanut butter and chocolate.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It's been fun. Here's our Dan Fraga variant cover for book 2. Dan's working on finishing Black Flag right now, but he was nice enough to get us a rough layout just so people would have kind of a rough idea of what his cover is going to look like. And obviously everybody knows Dan Fraga's art is stellar. So we're super stoked to have this variant cover. And we're hoping maybe we'll see what Dan's schedule looks like, but we're hoping we can have some pencils to show off before the end of the campaign, depending on schedules and scenarios like that.
Yeah, but this layout is killer already.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely awesome. And then here's our other nice treat is our John Malin line art, black and white line art variant for book 1. So with this campaign, you still can get book 1 and book 2. John was nice enough to do a variant cover for our first book, and it just turned out stellar. So we wanted to do something a little different with this campaign and do the black and white line art variant just so fans can kind of see all the intricate line work that John did with this cover. And it turned out really, nice. It's going to be a nice looking variant cover for book 1.
Yeah, well, like I said, don't tell John this, but I really like the ink line on this. I know it's digital, but I like it. Yeah, but John doesn't need that stuff because he doesn't need it to his head. Yeah, he gets crazy. All right, man. So you got three covers for the new book. Here's some of the interiors. This is your artwork with Andrew Dollhouse doing color. The great Andrew Dollhouse.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
I'm work here. Yeah.
Andrew's one of my friends from way back, and I was lucky enough to have him color the first book and now the second book. Andrew does a lot of work that people might be familiar with on Brett Booth's books. He did a lot of Justice League, a lot of the DC work that Brett Booth was doing. When Brett was on Bloodshot, he colored all that stuff. So to have a colorist of that level, working on my stuff is a real treat. And I mean, it just makes the book look 10 times better. So I'm pretty stoked with how everything's been turning out.
Yeah, I like the different colors for the different locations. It really does help the storytelling when you're cutting from scene to scene, and then thematically the colors are different as well. So it's a different location, not just visually like with the line art, but with the colors as well. So that's usually the sign of a really good colorist to me. Oh, look at this group shot.
Yep, little battle scene. The other thing me and Mark wanted to do. Book 1 mostly took place on Earth, but the villain is an intergalactic villain. So we wanted to kind of have some more extreme locales, some sci-fi adventure type stuff. So here the team is transported to an alien world and are kind of fighting the main bad guys, kind of minions here. So this is a big battle scene as they travel to an alien world.
Yeah, well, you guys come by. Check this book out. There's a lot of interior pages to scroll through. This double page is killer. The box is is amazing. So make sure you pick up the box. That holds how many books again?
5 to 6 books. With the Babe box in this campaign, you can get all 3 variants of book 2, and you can get both variants of book 1. So you get the full complete set with all the variant covers. It includes all the prints, all the trading cards, all the extras that everybody's going to get. So it's kind of a nice collector's package, and you're going to get everything with it. So it's a nice bang for your buck and a fun collector's box with some nice art of the ladies from Codename Killswitch on there.
These things are killer for your book. I display some of my cooler collection, on my bookshelf. And so these have like the spine, so you can put that right in your bookshelf like a book. And so you can pull it out and you have your whole collection there. I think these are really killer ideas. And I'm a sucker for that magnetic seal.
Oh, yeah. Just snap shut. Yeah.
It's the little things that really, Clint, that just, excite me. Hey, would you mind if I share my campaign a little bit?
No, absolutely.
Okay. I won't go into as much detail, but hopefully, can you see this now? I'm doing this right now.
Okay, so,
yeah, this is Chrono Mechanics Retrofit. They do more before the dawn of time than most do all day. We are at 51,378. A batch of books went out the other day, you guys. So I think we're caught up with all the orders now. So the really cool thing about this campaign right now is if you back a book, you will get the book ASAP. So these books are going out as they're ordered. So you shouldn't have to wait very long. I think Pamela, my wife, who's doing all the fulfilling, she's getting things out within a couple days of the orders. So, it's just really going to take as long as it takes for the post to get it to you, because we're not really taking any time at all to fulfill the orders themselves. So, this is Chrono Mechanics. This is Team 9.2 of Sector 7. They are the best repair team to ever turn a wrench. So they work for Chrono Incorporated, and it's kind of Chrono Mechanics, they're time repairmen. So it's the super fantastic meets the mundane. So they see the cosmos, they see the nuts and bolts of the universe and how it's all put together in a way that none of us will ever see or know. But to them, it's just a pain in the ass job. It's just something they do. So they're not like, ooh, look at this, look at that. They don't really care. They just get in, they fix the machine, and then they just want to get home, crack open a beer, and relax. So that's kind of the concept. And this story, it wraps around the new recruit, Doug. So Doug is the new recruit. They lost a team member. I also want to, in this, it's a fun action adventure sci-fi, but I also wanted to show that there's stakes. So they lost a team member. So these teams are always, there's four repairmen. So if there isn't 4, then, there's trouble. So Chrono Incorporated recruits Doug from the latter 20th century, the early 70s. And so they never recruit from there because the latter 20th century is just slackers. The early 20th century, not so much. But the latter, they look at it as like there's no one that's really worthy of being a mechanic. And so then you scratch your head like, well, why was this guy picked? So, it's kind of an Alice in Wonderland kind of, character out of his depth, his world, and is thrown into a universe and place that he has no idea of, and for the most part doesn't even want to be part of it. He looks at work as a 4-letter word. He doesn't really like it very much. So he's kind of a slacker. So here's Chrono Incorporated. There's a bunch of interior pages for you guys to see. This is me going way outside of my creative wheelhouse, not just with the writing, but with the drawing as well. So the link is in the description. So when you guys get some time, go check it out. If you like what you see, back a book. We have a bunch of others. We have variant covers. We have a work in progress behind the scenes book. Here's some of the artwork. We have 4 variants. We have Oot. We have Doug, we have Zinn, and we have Caravaggio. So yeah, you guys, I want to thank everybody who supported this campaign. And once again, anybody who backs a book within a couple days or so, they will go out, your orders will go out, and you should get the book ASAP. So thanks for giving me some time to do that, Clint. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right. So should we get into the game show aspect of this this broadcast?
Now, these are me asking you questions about kind of your whole career kind of thing. So these aren't like trivia questions where you're going to have to come up with the right answer.
So this isn't like, what's my favorite color?
I mean, I guess maybe people want to know what your favorite color is.
If I could be a tree, what kind of tree would I want? What kind
of tree would you cut down, and what would you make out of it?
If you had to kill somebody, who would it be?
And how would you do it?
Oh, the follow-up.
Should I go with my first question?
Yeah. Let's see. Let's catch up in the chat real quick.
Oh yeah, you bet.
See, okay, we got Spears
Mark in the chat.
Yeah, Spears Cars in now. We have Jonah. I think he's a fan of yours.
Helsinki. Exactly. That's exactly how to pronounce it.
And somebody said it was like Finland. So just for the record,
Helsinki, Finland. Yes.
So we have Kami Markin, Billy Basco, and Oni64, and how do you say this? Improbi.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I like to pick a delicious fruit from.
Something a little creepy about that.
That one makes me uncomfortable.
Yes.
There will be no picking from our trees today.
Yeah.
Okay, Clint. So let's do this, man. So we also said that we were going to try to get some kind of timer aspect to this. Do you have a way to do that, or should we just when we think 2 minutes is up, we'll just stop?
Here, I've got a timer on my phone. We can do that.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to get through 1 million questions, but it's going to be more like 30.
Yeah. All right. I think you always start out at the beginning. So what brought you into comics? Like, what were you a big fan of comics as a kid? Everybody's got a little slight variation on that kind of thing, but what brought you into comics?
Okay, it was this complete mishaps. It was I was pursuing music, I was pursuing art, but not comic books. So I wanted to be an illustrator. So I wanted to be like Drew Struzan, do movie posters. I want to do album covers. I want to do TV guide covers, all that type of stuff, more illustration. But I always loved comics as a kid. But I stopped reading, once I got into my teen years. So then I met a teacher who knew an artist that did comic books. I needed to pay the rent. I met this guy. He turned me on to Jim Valentino. Jim Valentino needed an assistant. And boom, my comics career started. Was that under 2 minutes?
That was well under 2 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah, you
might get 31 questions in.
So it was an art instructor who knew a comic book artist. Is that what I caught there? Yeah. And then that person knew Jim Shooter.
Jim Valentino. Yeah. So if I said
also it's Valentino, okay.
Yeah. So that artist was Brian Murray, who he did a lot of the Neil Adams continuity comics, like Mega, stuff like that in the day. And then he came over to Extreme Studios and did Supreme.
Oh, I remember Brian Murray on Supreme. Okay, I remember that. Yeah. Okay, and that was the guy who kind of got you into comics then.
Yeah, that was the guy that knew the teacher.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, there always is kind of a weird connection. It's like somebody who knows somebody that kind of, because comics is a hard thing to like. I remember being 19 and thinking, I'd like to get into comics. How the hell do you even do it?
You start, yeah. And I read a book on success, and they said it's never the direct route to wherever you want to go. There's always some connecting tissue. There's a person that's in between that knows the two parties. So kind of is responsible for getting the two parties together.
Yeah,
so it more often works that way.
Yeah, and even in that early stage, it's networking. It's making friends, having those connections, kind of. And I mean, comics is a lot of networking. So my next question, you're getting into comics. So why inking? You were saying illustration at first. So were you a penciler or inking, or what was the decision making in that early stage there?
A lot of these decisions were just practicality and just money, just bottom line stuff. So I always penciled and inked my own stuff. Even when I was a kid and I drew comic books, in the treehouse with my friends, and we wrote and drew comic books, I always inked them because it always seemed like they had to be complete. So I'd even color them and I'd word balloon everything because I just felt like that had to be there. And I didn't know about the assembly line process when I was a kid anyway. So I always did both. And so I was always kind of a complete artist. Like in illustration, I painted, I drew, I used Prismacolors, I would airbrush, I would use acrylics, just all kinds of different things, ink, you name it. And so when I got into comics, I started at DC as a penciler and as an inker at Marvel, and I got work the same day. So I started off as a penciler inker on the same exact day. Oh, wow. So I never really distinguished between the two very much. And comics really wasn't all hung up on that anyways, kind of like stereotyping you in like you're this or you're that. Yep. So I always jumped back and forth between the two. But the reason the inking kind of ruled out is because I could ink faster than I could pencil. And I needed to pay the rent. It was that simple. It was practicality. It was like I could ink 2 to 3 pages a day. I could pencil maybe one, Yeah.
Nope, that makes sense. So we covered a little bit. Next question was, how did you break in? We covered that a little bit. So you didn't go to conventions to like submit a portfolio or anything like that. It was your connection through Brian Murray and then getting in through. Did you say Jim Shooter or Jim Valentino?
It was Valentino. So is the official question like just to elaborate or?
Yeah, just like, what was that first like meeting an editor, that whole process of, getting in at the company?
Well, I did do comic conventions and stuff, but I don't think I was too like thinking anything would really happen. I just kind of liked going. And when I was a kid, they had these things called Creation Comics, and I think they were all over the place in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s. And so they would have these art contests, and I just did artwork and brought them to the show so I could win something. Sometimes it would be free artwork, sometimes it'd be comic books, it'd be just different things. So I was just so bottom line oriented. I was like, if I do something good, I might win the contest and then I might get something out of it. And so the California shows, not to pat myself on the back, but I freaking dominated, man. I would win almost every time. And the cool thing is, I remember one of the judges was Boris Vallejo. And at that time, I was like, Boris is pretty killer. He does some cool stuff. And so he judged it, and I won. He picked it. He picked my artwork. And so then I remember him saying something like, he said, I'm going to give you some advice. He said, don't get precious about your work. I guess he maybe heard me talking or the way my demeanor was. He was like, do yourself a favor. Never get precious about your artwork. Don't get too hung up on it. Just get in, get it done, move on to the next piece. Kind of thing. Yeah.
And a veteran there giving you some sage advice is just like pay the bills and move on.
Yeah, but early on at the convention, I met Art Adams because he was Northern California, I was Southern California, so he would come down to Southern California, and a guy named Art Nichols, and then Rob Liefeld. So those were kind of the four of us. Like we all hung out, in the Southern California cons. And so Art Nichols was the guy that I met in New York when I was at Marvel. And when I was pitching my stuff for the first time, trying to get work. So he suggested, like I saw him at the offices and I hadn't seen him in years and I didn't know he was working professionally. And so we caught up And then he said, I got to drop off some pages over at DC. He said, would you like to share a cab? And so I went over there, and that's when I got pencil work from Bob Greenberger. So if it wasn't for him, I would never have got in the offices at DC, because at the time, if you were nobody, you didn't even get in the door.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was wondering. And there's farther down the line, but like, so going into the Marvel and the DC offices in those early days like that, I would personally, just as a fan, love to hear about those kind of days where, like you said, if you're nobody, you can't just waltz in, but, you kind of, got in with your friend there and were able to, I mean, with Bob Greenberger, did you have your portfolio ready of stuff to just plop on his desk, and he was nice enough to let you come in for a while and talk?
Yeah.
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, let's back up for just a minute. So is this the fourth question now?
This is the fourth. Yeah, I'm forgetting see, I'm going to lose track of the timer and everything. This can be the fourth question, but it's actually, you led right into it. So it's a question farther down the list, but we might as well go into it right now. Since
it's no problem. I kind of want to I want to see how many we can actually do. These questions.
So we'll keep track. We're on 4 right now.
Yeah, so far you're kicking butt, my friend. So the what was the question again? It was
talking with getting into the Marvel and DC offices in those early days there, and like, how difficult was it to just get time with an editor and show them your work, that kind of thing?
Okay, the Marvel thing was difficult because, just to bring Jim Shooter into the story, I did meet him at a convention, at one of those creations, I think it was, and so I showed him my portfolio. He goes, this is pretty good, but you're not quite there yet. He said, we have this bullpen, the Romita Raiders, they were called. And so Johnny Romita Sr. would kind of oversee like new talent. And so that they would do art corrections, anything that needed to be done, on the books, on the pages, they would do. So sometimes even lettering, just anything that needed to be done. And so then you also got art lessons while you were there from Johnny Romita. So it was killer. So he said, when you come to New York City, he said, and I'll hook you up with the Romita Raiders. And so I think at the time it did pay, but not a lot, And so I never followed it up with Jim Shooter. I just thought, like, this was it. This was gospel, right? He said, come to New York City, whatever. So I worked my ass off. I saved a bunch of money, to go to New York City, my Joe job. I hopped on a flight. I had met a guy through Jim Valentino. His name was Craig Anderson. He's the son of the Anderson guy that created Marmaduke, the comic strip.
Oh, okay.
I don't know his first name, but it's something Anderson. So Craig lived in New York City. He lived in Hell's Kitchen. So I did work it out with him that I would stay at his place until I could, get my feet on the ground. Because I was thinking I was going to go there, spend some time in New York, be a working artist in New York City. Coming from California, just crazy naive. I think I was probably 20, 21 years old. And so just out of the blue, I don't set it up with Marvel. I don't have an appointment, no, nothing. I get on a plane. I didn't even tell Craig the day I was going to get there, really. I just did it, right? like I'm going next door. I'm knocking on a door. I'm just like, hey, I'm here to hang out. So I fly there. I still have my luggage and everything. I go right to Marvel. And so I'm in the lobby. They won't beat me up. They won't beat me up, right? They won't let me go. And I'm like, I flew all the way from California. I have a meeting with Jim Shooter, right? I'm like, pleading my case. And so the lady let me up, right? But there's another level. This is the lobby of the building just to get to the Marvel lobby. So now I'm in the Marvel lobby and I'm selling the woman the same way. I'm like, listen, I'm here to see Jim Shooter. We were in New York, and I'm like doing all this stuff. And I must be hysterical at this point because I think like this isn't going to happen, right? And so then she like goes, okay. She lets me in. Like she just must have saw like how pathetic I was. She lets me in, and so then I walk right over to Jim Shooter's secretary, right? So then I'm here to see Jim Shooter, and she's like. She looks on the list. She goes, I don't see an Art Thibert. Like, did you call? Did you whatever? I go, no. And so then I tell her my backstory. She goes, so this was at a convention a month ago in California. Yeah, he told me. And then he told me to come on by if I was in New York. And then she's like, oh shit, this is like I may as well just have been a country bumpkin, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like I had no idea how the real world worked. I had no idea how any of this stuff worked, right? So then she goes, I'll go talk to Jim. So she must have saw how pathetic I was. So then she comes back and then she's like, Jim doesn't remember you.
Oh no.
And I'm like, no. He said Ramita Raiders. He said all this stuff. He said, come by, he'll set me up, whatever. And so she's just like, oh, I don't know. So she goes back and talks to him again. And then she comes back and then she said, the best he said he could do is you could work here as an intern. And then I'm like, oh, thank you so much. I'm like, I'm overly thankful, right? I don't know what an intern is. I have no idea, right? It was a job, right?
It was a job.
And so then I said, well, how much does it pay? She goes, internships don't pay. And I go, well, am I going to be drawing? She goes, no, you're probably just going to be handing editors packages and letters and stuff like that. And I'm like, but why would I want this job? She goes, I'm sorry, it's the best we could do. And I'm like, oh shit. So Clint, have I reached my 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think that was right at 2 minutes. It's 2 minutes on the dot on that one.
Yeah, so now we're question 5.
Yep, question 5. All right. Okay. So one of the first things I noticed you on, and probably a lot of people noticed you on, was on X-Men and on Superman, inking on Jim Lee and inking on Dan Jurgens. Those were big, huge books. Were those books happening around the same time, or were you working on both ever at the same time, or were they kind of a time frame? Memory now, but was that kind of around the similar time period?
They did cross over, yeah.
That's what I thought.
So Adventures of Superman was my monthly. So that was like in stone. In those days, when somebody said you're on the book, you were on the book for years, unless something really, like you screwed up really bad or something like that. So when Marvel called, I started working on X-Men annuals. And so I was working with Terry Shoemaker, I think, and Art Adams.
Oh, okay.
And so then the Jim Lee thing happened. So Bob Harris called me and said, I got this other guy. His name's Jim Lee. Would you like to help out on a book or two? So it was just kind of a fill-in thing at the beginning. So I did. I forget which issue of Uncanny X-Men over Jim, and then we just hit it off. And I knew Jim prior. We had met each other at a convention maybe a year, 6 months before. So we were both West Coast guys. And whenever there weren't a lot of artists on the West Coast. They were mostly, East Coast, New York City, or within drivable distance to the offices. So it was very rare that there would be a California artist. So when there was, you really kind of like, hey man, what's your process? You start asking questions and things like that. So that's under that's going to be.
Yeah, that's well under. So you're doing 22 pages of Dan Jurgens' Superman, and then you were doing fill-in inks on Jim Lee's X-Men at the same time. So and then I was working on the X-Men annuals as well. All at the same time. So in a 30-day span, in a month span, that's usually what artists go by. How many pages were you inking, would you say, during that time period?
I mean, if it was 3 books, then that would be 66 pages.
So you were doing 2-3 pages a day for 30 days.
Right. With covers and whatever else, up. And I mean, you had to do a lot of work because I think my page rate initially was probably like $40, $45 to ink. It went up pretty quick. I remember when I got the $70, I think was on Superman. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. $70 a page. Man, that's great money.
And I mean this is what made having original art so important in those days and selling original art at conventions. It's like now people like look at what these hear stories of what some of these pages went for and now what they're going for now, and it's just astronomical. I think I have a question on here about original art. Like, I don't know if you want to say or not. We can skip over this one, but just out of curiosity, with some of the pages that you worked on, like what was a big price for selling a page of original art like in those days?
In the early days when I broke in?
Yeah, well, maybe in like the heydays of like X-Men and Superman, with how popular and successful those were.
Well, in the early days, no one wanted the artwork at all.
Really? Oh my!
Although I do have to. There's one thing that happens. I think you must have to show some kind of promise, but there are collectors that will buy your first work, the whole book. I found this out later. They'll buy it just. They won't even really haggle, but usually you don't know what it's worth anyway. It's usually not that much, because it's your first work. It will be later, but when you just did it, it's not really worth something. So I guess it's like more like speculative, like purchasing. So they're kind of like thinking, well, this guy's got some promise. I have his first job. So I sold a Teen Titans Spotlight with cover, the whole thing, like 22 pages with cover.
Wow.
To one collector. So I haven't seen that on for sale or anything, since. So maybe he really did want it, like for his personal collection. But I talked to people later, and they say there are guys that come in, like original art collectors, and they're kind of speculating on where you're going to be down the line. So they buy, as much early artwork from you as possible. So I remember when that happened, because that was a big deal. But other than that, it was like pulling teeth. Like no one really wanted the pages.
Wow.
But then, smash cut to the 90s.
Yeah.
I'm a decade or so already into my career. And then you're working on, X-Men books. And then the Superman books, when I was working on them, there wasn't very much demand either. But as we were building, like towards the death of Superman, the engagement of Lois and Clark, the wedding album, all those things, it was building. That book was building every month. So those pages, started becoming in demand, and then the Jim Lee stuff, I think was kind of the same way, but it was still kind of beginning phases because no one knew who Jim Lee was. You know what I mean?
I'm always looking at it after the fact, but like you were in it beforehand, and it was like you got to see the buildup. Whereas a fan, I'm like, God, this X-Men 275. Like, I remember seeing that issue and like thinking it looked so much different than what I remember comics being, and it kind of stuff exploded. That's the Superman there,
right? But I guarantee you, those X-Men pages in the day, the Jim Lee pages were probably going for 100, 150.
That's a good investment. Talking about speculative collectors out there. There's some people that made
thousands of dollars now. Yeah.
There's some people that made serious money off that. You can buy a car with one Jim Lee page.
Yeah, I wish I had some of those. I have Will Spertasio pages. I don't have any Art Adams pages left. But
there's another one, Art Adams.
Art Adams in the day sold for top dollar. Like even early on, like Adams' art was always, a coveted kind of thing. So the price was always really, really high. I remember I sold the Fantastic Four cover because I did 3 issues with him and Walter.
Oh, that's right. You did the Wolverine, Ghost Rider, Spider-Man.
Yeah. And so
those were awesome. Those were so awesome.
I got in the art returns the one where they're all leaping down, leaping down, the Hulk's in the background, like just anchoring the composition. And I think I sold that for $10,000.
Oh,
and man. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. I was like, holy crap.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's worth so much money now.
I was gonna say it's like $10,000 for one page, and it's probably astronomical now what that page is worth.
Yeah, I sold a piece of like was it Nightwing artwork that, because I was going to do a Nightwing miniseries, so I did a retail poster, and I think I sold that for like $5,000, and I was like, wow, because I guess just the combination of me and Nightwing and the rarity of it, that was kind of one of those big pieces too. Like I remember there was like some core pieces at the time that I sold that were pretty, like at the time you knew that they were important pieces, you know what I mean? Because of the dollar amount. But just to add, at one time, like Jim and I had a deal. I think Scott Dunbier was the one that brokered it. They sold all my artwork. So if I worked with Wills or if I worked with Jim, they just went into a group. And so a third of those pages or a half of those pages, depending if I was doing finishes or just inks on them, then I would just get money. So we never divvied up the pages. It was it sold, I would get, that return on it. Yeah.
That's, and actually you're jumping ahead to one of my other questions.
Sorry.
I know no, it's fine. It's fine. But I've heard that how inkers and pencilers usually have worked out how they're going to divvy up the pages for sales. And then I've also, that leads into another thing, I've also heard horror stories about pencilers and inkers arguing over specific pages, who's going to get a cover, who's going to get this, that sort of thing. I was going to ask you if you ever ran into that or had those kind of horror stories or heard those kind of horror stories of, a penciler and inker fighting over the breakup, which it makes sense what you just explained about Scott Dunbier selling them and then divvying up the money so that there's not that.
Yeah, but early when I first started working with Homage, and I have to say that because there was Wills, Jim, and Scott. Like I worked hand in hand with those guys. Like there were four of us doing these books.
And made it more complicated to break it up, I'd imagine.
Right. Well, Scott and I would shift between Wills and Jim all the time. So we would ink one or the other. And so I do remember there was an Uncanny X-Men, this was early on, that I was working on. And so then we were getting deadline crunch time, right? And so then Scott said, I can help you out. I'll ink like the last page to help you on the deadline. And I was like, oh, that would be great, Scott. It's a splash page of Magneto. It's that one.
Oh, yes.
His hands up, and he's just like the iconic pose.
I know exactly.
I was like, you son of a... So there was a little trickery to get some original artwork back and stuff like that as well. So it was all good fun. And so I think the most I ever got into was with Adam Kubert, because Adam was very like, there was certain pages that he was very, like, I want this page. And so sometimes I would just give him crap, it didn't matter to me, but I just didn't want to make it easy on him.
Give him a little bit of a hard time over it.
So I would wait for him to kind of melt down a little bit and get irate with me, and I go, yeah, okay, you can have it.
Nice. All right, so that was that question.
So that's 8. So now we're question 9. We're almost double digits.
Yep, we're at question 9. And that's, you already answered it. So yeah. Back to the Death of Superman stuff. You were inking some of the Death of Superman stuff during that period. And what did you think of when you started to see the crazy Death of Superman sales numbers Death of Superman kind of exploded just like X-Men, or maybe even bigger I remember being news stories and stuff on the Death of Superman during that time period. Can you go into that and what you thought of when you started seeing those sales numbers come in and hearing kind of the buzz around it?
Well, the thing is, what was kind of interesting at the time is I was part of it, but not fully on the team at that point.
Right.
Because my loyalty, that's a bad word, but I was between DC and Marvel. And so when the Superman team decided to do the Death of, there were teams. There were 4 books that kind of crossed over, and there were teams.
Yeah.
And so what was happening is I wasn't doing the interiors with Dan Dan Jurgens anymore. I was penciling and inking action cover covers.
Oh, that's right. You were doing the covers for, yeah, that's right. I remember that now.
Yeah, so I did that for about a year or so. So I was still in the office, but not kind of like part of the main team.
Okay.
So I was just hired as like a cover artist. So they weren't letting me know all the plans like they had before, Yeah. So they what was it? Mike Carlin, who was the editor on Superman, was just kind of like, well, this is kind of the idea. This is what we're going for. Because what they did is there were a series of books that they were kind of unwrapping Doomsday. You know what I mean? They weren't
right. Yeah, I remember he had the big green suit,
the cloak on, and the wrapping
came off a piece at a time, kind of.
And so I think there were 2 covers or something like that, and I would get the other covers and just bits and pieces, but only stuff that Mike thought I needed to know, because he didn't want maybe me going to somebody and going, hey, look at this or whatever. So they wanted to really keep it under wraps. So when they revealed it, it was a big deal. And so that's kind of was my involvement with Doomsday. But, it was a pivotal cover, Action Comics cover, where it was like 200 miles to Metropolis or whatever. Yeah. And it's the one where you actually start seeing Doomsday for the first time.
I remember those covers now. They were I loved your covers on Superman. Those were awesome. Yeah.
Thanks. So then I think I stayed with the team, doing covers. I think that was probably about the last of the covers I did, because I think Mike was kind of like, not that he couldn't trust me, but I think he just felt it was safer if I wasn't working on the books anymore, that kind of thing. And to be honest, I mean, I was already full on in the X office at that point. That's really where my loyalty, if, I don't like to use those terms, but that's where, my head was at more so at that point anyways. And I remember Dan Jurgens having a conversation at the death of, he made all this money and sold, broke records and all this other stuff. And he goes, don't you wish you would have stayed on Superman? And I said, no. I said, because this was also retrospect. This is looking back. I said, Jim Lee and Will and Scott and myself, we had a decade. Everybody wanted to emulate that style. That was the house style for comics for 10 years.
Yeah.
That style. And I said, personally, I was a small part of that. And I feel like, just personally as an artist, I thought that was better.
Yeah.
Than that. He goes, yeah, but the money. And I said, those X-Men books sold pretty well.
I mean, no offense, but Death of Superman was kind of a gimmick thing, And I mean, X-Men sold because of you guys. I mean, X-Men was one of the most beautiful books out there, and I mean, like you said, what you guys did on there influenced the comic universe and artists for like a decade plus.
They called it like all the East Coasters called the West Coast look. So it had a title, it had a name and everything. So, there was a movement in comics and it went into that. For right or wrong, there are people now that look back and go, it was hideous, it was horrible. But, for right or wrong, I think, it was what it was. It did have an impact.
It was popular. It was hugely popular. Usually the people that were complaining about it were writers that wanted to, have the book be all about them and have like nine giant word narrative blocks that covered up the art.
And just to prove your point, the next decade was that. It was all those writers trying to prove that they were more important than the artists.
Yeah, it was really, that's really what those 2 decades ended up becoming. Now it's, who knows what it is now.
So question 10.
Question 10. Your favorite book that you worked on, specific book that you remember that pops out to you.
Does it have to be a Marvel DC?
No, any favorite book that you worked on.
My favorite book of all time is the first Chronomechanics book.
Oh, that's
yeah. I always get, because it's weird because I have I think of myself kind of as 2 different people. Like there's the Marvel DC stuff, there's the Image, independent stuff. And so sometimes I don't combine those two, but I think if there was just one book, it would be Chrono Mechanics.
Yeah, and I mean that's you wrote it. That's like your creation, so that makes perfect sense. So then we can go on to the next question. If we limit it to Marvel, DC, your main stuff, your mainstream stuff, what would your favorite book be that you worked on?
I gotta think if there's a favorite book or if there's just runs, because it's weird, because like when I was coming up the ranks and when I was working heavily, it was never about one book. You know what I mean?
Right.
It was like a series of books. So you always looked at it as like a run of books.
Sure.
So I think for me, it would be an X-Men book.
X-Men.
It would probably be Carlos Pacheco's X-Men run.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I really liked that because I thought I was pushing the envelope. Like when I worked with Jurgens, I kind of came up with a different style. But I think I was younger, and I think I was scared most of the time, so I didn't know, I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing. But I think by the time I got on, working with Carlos on X-Men, I felt like I was more like I knew what I was doing. I was conscious of it, so the decision making was that, it was like, this is what I want to do on this book, as far as style. Yeah.
Did we cover for like going back to like being at conventions, and a lot of this goes back to the X-Men and Superman runs because it was so huge there, and with Death of Superman, were you doing signings at conventions and kind of the craziness of that with the lines and how popular and how hugely popular those things were at that time?
It got crazy. So there was pre-image and then there's image. So pre-image had already started. So I remember that there was a promoter. I think he did the Great Eastern Cons. I think his name was Fred. I want to say Harris, but I don't think it was Fred Harris. But it was Fred something, and he ran and promoted these shows. And so, we would do these shows. And I think that Jim Lee worked out a deal. I think it was with this Fred guy that we would do these tours. We would do X tours. And so then it was always like, it was Jim and I, like Wills would do what he could. And Scott Williams never really did conventions. Like, I don't know. I never really knew what it was. Like if he was just not as, cool with just hanging out at shows, which I don't think was the case. But I'm not really sure. So, or if he just felt like he needed to stay back and get work done, because that was always the big thing. Like you didn't do conventions if you couldn't get, work done. So I was always a lot faster than Scott. I could probably out ink him like 3-1. As far as the same style and everything. And sometimes you can't even really tell the difference with the style. So I did that tour with Jim, and what ended up happening is that we would do these different cities throughout the country. And so there would be like Larry Stroman would be in this city. So then he would join the tour for that show. So whatever, like Silvestri would come in, Mark Silvestri would come in and do some shows with us. So it was kind of like, I think Jim mainly was like always the base of it, because I had a contract with this guy too, and I think Jim did, and I'm not sure if Wilson Scott did, but we were the main ones. And so then we would do all these shows, and then whoever was, either brought in or lived in that city would come and do the show. And then long story short, what ended up happening is what we were doing just organically is we were creating image. Like these were all the guys that were going to come in and part of image early on. And so it just kind of worked out that way. So then it goes into the image years. And so then, that's when it was a zoo. It was nuts. And I remember doing a Great Eastern Convention for the promotion of Black and White in '94. And the fire marshals had to move me. Because it was me, Jim Lee, and Mike Judge, the guy who created Beavis and Butt-Head.
Beavis and Butt-Head.
Yeah,
Nice.
but he had just started. Like no one knew who that guy was.
Right, sure.
So they were like because I think that Jay had Hell Shock. So we both had ash cans, like promotional ash cans. So we had crazy lines. And so they were like, we got to split you guys up, So they like disrupted, like we were like crazy kids in school, you know what I mean? Like we got to break you two up, So you go in that corner, you go in this corner. So they split us up because of the craziness. And I remember that to this day. Like these guys the fire marshals came in with the promoter and they were like, we got to do something about this. You're blocking aisles and things. And then of course the San Diego Con, the legendary San Diego Cons with Image Comics, with Rob having a spaceship and Todd McFarlane having a funny car, and these were on the floor of the convention site,
Well, that leads me into one of the questions coming up here, and I think we're in the teens now.
13.
We remember the spaceship and Todd's funny car. We remember Todd buying the baseball, so I'll take those ones off. But what was one of the wildest or craziest things you saw during the Image heydays of the creators that were just like overnight? These were already successful comic book creators, but some of them overnight were. I mean, I remember hearing Rob selling millions of copies of early Youngblood, Jim selling millions of copies of Wildcats, and that's a lot of money when you think of that as the creator-owned book that you're pretty much almost self-publishing. I think it was Malibu in the early days, but they switched out of that pretty quickly. Like, what was one of the wildest things you saw in the mix there?
I think there was just lines, just people, just masses,
just the amount of interest.
Yeah, and for the most part behaved, but it would always just take one person, and it was usually just one person that would be like, I waited, whatever, and so sometimes the line would get cut off, or like the promoter wouldn't handle things properly.
So I see.
Somebody might be waiting a half hour and then the line gets cut. And they never get to get their book signed or meet their favorite artists or whatever. And it was totally understandable. So the artists and we would try to talk to the promoter, like, do this well in advance, maybe give the last person in line a sign or something, so then anybody comes up after that, they can tell them that this is where the line ends. You know what I mean? Because the artists have to take a break. We either have to eat or go to the bathroom or something. It really was like that intense. Like you didn't leave the table for hours. So I remember like t-shirts flying, I remember Rob standing up on tables, I just remember like screaming crowds. I remember just freebies everywhere. Like it was Beatlemania.
It was, yeah.
It was pretty much the closest thing to like that I would ever come to like anything like that. Hysteria. Some people actually losing it. If they couldn't get a place in line, stuff like that. There was a lot of just pandemonium, pretty much. Yeah.
So being in the mix with those early Image days, and you knowing Rob, and you worked in Rob's studio at one point, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so I was part of Homage Studios in the early days, and then it became Wildstorm. So
you were at Wildstorm also in those early days.
A little bit. Like I worked with them. Like I was never like, even when I worked at Extreme, I was still doing some work for Marvel and some work for Wildstorm.
Sure.
And Todd, like I did Spawn. I did 3 issues of Spawn.
Oh, cool.
The Extreme Studios office, so it wasn't like an exclusive, I guess.
You were a freelancer and you were working for all the big books that you could, basically.
Yeah, I had an office there, so, and I never made it like tried to make it a secret or anything. I just did things matter of factly. I never asked for permission, but at the same time, I never tried to hide anything.
No, sure. So, there was a ton of big artists coming through there at this time, and like J. Scott Campbell, I think I remember you saying earlier that you like looked at his portfolio at a convention. Travis Charest showed up at Wildstorm at a certain point. Stephen Platt with Rob, I think, on Prophet. Like, just being in the studio and seeing all these new guys and like all this explosion of art, like, can you just kind of talk a little bit about just that whole creative energy that was going on in that studio?
Yeah, one of the things that Rob had me do, I guess it was officially, unofficially, because I think it was supposed to come with a paycheck, but it never did. But I didn't mind doing it. When I would do shows and things, I would kind of just keep my eye out for new talent. So that was kind of my thing. And so I do remember bringing, like J. Scott Campbell's portfolio to Rob. I remember because I was a Marvel guy, friends with Greg Capullo. And then Greg, I think, was working on X-Force.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, what's this Image thing all about? And so he gave me some stuff to show Rob. And I don't know ever why Rob didn't use those guys. You know what I mean? Because I had portfolios. I still have J. Scott Campbell's portfolio somewhere. I have all the Xeroxes and things. Yeah, so I should try to find those. But yeah, it was there was a lot of talent, and it was coming just fast and furious. Like, there were submissions like at Extreme Studios that were, like 2-3 feet high, envelopes like that. So yeah, there was a lot of people coming to Image. I think once it's like one of those things, like if you build it, they will come kind of idea, like Field of Dreams. So it's like Image was the destination. So then, people were just at that point coming, like Michael Turner, all these guys were coming in. And that's when too, that things are really working, because there's the founders and then there's all the support, like what I consider myself as, but we all went at the same time. We left Marvel at the same time. Then there were like the next wave.
Yeah, there's a second generation.
When you see the next wave and you start saying like Michael Turner, J. Scott Campbell, Greg Capullo, you start, Dave Finch, you start naming these names, and then all of a sudden you start going, that's a great bullpen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's an amazing bullpen. And I think like right now CG is doing the same thing. You know what I mean? Like there's the main guys, or the mainstream guys, I should say.
Yep.
But then there's like the farm team that are grooming right now, and they're learning how to play the game, and they're coming in, and they might actually just exceed beyond anything that we could imagine. So I do think like these things are great ideas, where you have like new people coming in.
Oh, definitely, yeah. You see the energy there, and that energy draws talent, and thank you. I appreciate that. So you were working in Rob's studio, but did you ever ink Rob?
Yeah, I inked Rob prior to that. Like I inked Hawk and Dove, like unofficially.
Okay.
Because he was still living at his folks' house, and I had an apartment in Huntington Beach. So, like when you're young and you can get out of your folks' house, and your friend's got a house or an apartment or something like that, you always went there because it was like freedom, right? You could do stuff.
Yeah.
So he would hang out in the evenings and we would just work together. He had his laptop, like little board, and I had my drawing board, and we would work together. And so the funny thing is, when I was working at DC, I started on The Warlord. That was my official title. So I did some of that, the series of that. And so when he came in, his first job was the bonus books. DC had like a new talent showcase, and I think they were called bonus books. And so the character they gave him was the Warlord, which was so I'm working on the Warlord, and then he gets the Warlord. We're already friends. So if you look, like there's some background elements that are the same in his bonus book that were in my book. So we were just kind of jamming, on stuff. And so then Hawk and Dove was offered to me from Barbara Kiesel to follow up. So then I had already been offered Time Masters and said I would do that for another editor. So I passed on it, but I recommended Rob for the job. And And so Rob Liefeld got the job. And so then when, we were doing the same thing, Rob would go, Carl Kiesel's inking me like this, whatever, but let's see what your take would be. So I would ink a panel or two. Like, I never knew how anybody felt about this. I never knew. I just did it. You know what I mean? Like in the day, you're just kind of a stupid kid. You just do things because they're fun or interesting to do. And so there are some pages there. I don't know what those pages would be or what the panels would be, but I did some, inks over Rob then. And then on was it New Mutants? I did some work. And then I was supposed to be the inker on X-Force when Rob launched that. So,
okay.
Yeah, I was actually going to ink either Whilce or Jim on X-Men. And then my second book was going to be X-Force with Rob. And then I remember I was like, it just didn't happen. And then I was talking to Jim Lee about it. And Jim like, you know what happened, Art, is Rob saw the numbers. I go, yeah. He goes, he just decided to ink it himself.
Ink it himself, more royalties.
It should get money. I never faulted Rob. I was like, that's just good business.
Yeah, when you know your book's going to sell 1 million copies, and why cut that pie up any more than you have to?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Go to my question list. I did have. Was there ever a penciler that you really loved that you never got to ink?
Yes, that's a good question. I think this is question 17. So
we should
we're past the midway. Yeah. Am I still under 2 minutes? I think.
Yeah, so. I don't think you've broken 2 minutes yet.
Okay, so I'm still following the rules. Good. Okay, so I always wanted to ink John Buscema.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's I think for me it scares the shit out of me. Like to this day, even if it was like a blue line just to do for myself, I think it would intimidate and scare the shit out of me. One, I just have so much respect for the man. Mm-hmm. Two, it's slightly outside of my wheelhouse. And then three, I know he hates just about every inker that's ever worked with him. You know what I mean? So all those things, but I'm kind of like a contrary guy. So for all those reasons are also why I want to do it. Yeah. And so there was I think it was some kind of like Silver Surfer crossover with maybe Malibu or something like that, like those Malibu characters when they were doing those crossover.
Oh, right. Yep.
I think when Malibu and Marvel, when Marvel bought Malibu, I think. So they were doing these crossovers, and John Buscema was going to do a Silver Surfer story, and there was talks about me inking him on that. So that's the closest I ever got to that dream. And then the other one was Gil Kane.
Oh,
Gil Kane. Yeah.
Gil Kane's, yeah. Those are good artists. Those would be kind of dream guys to ink over. All right. So
question 18.
Question 18. Okay, here we go. So I got into just some technical inking questions here. So biggest, like, this was always a fear of mine, inking, but biggest inking disaster. You always hear like ink hitting the page, spilling, going over pencils, or mistaking a line or something like that. Do you have a horror story from the 30 plus years?
Yeah, but then you quickly make sure you never do it again. You know what I mean? The worst, because I learned early on, I tape the inkwell to my drawing board.
Okay.
Like with as much tape as I can fit on it, and I even do the bump test. Because sometimes when you're working, you'll bump something. So I'll slightly bump it, and if it doesn't tip over, then I know it's good. And so then also it's all muscle memory. So like here's my drawing board here. So I'm inking, go over. So there's always this kind of movement that's going on. And then I usually have a sheet of paper here where I dip it in, and then the key is just slightly tap it and throw off that little excess of ink, because you never want to go in with a full load, because as soon as you push down, if it's overfilled, it'll just go everywhere. So I didn't get to that point where it went everywhere. I brought it over, and I didn't just do that little thing. And so when I brought it over, it just flung out when I was bringing it over, and the trajectory right onto a small face. If it was a bigger face, it'd be okay, but it was a small face. So the splatter pretty much destroyed the face. Like I couldn't see it anymore. So what you do is you blot it up as quick as you can, because sometimes if you can get the ink up quick enough, you can still kind of see through it. You know what I mean? Like if you get it up enough. So I did that so I could slightly see it. But the thing also for new inkers, I would always make Xerox copies of the page before I inked it.
Oh,
so that's also why I have all these Xeroxes. I have boxes and boxes of Jim Lee pencils, of Will's Pistachio pencils, all these different guys.
Yeah.
So I have those pencils. And so then I would look at it, and then I would try to recreate it the best of my ability. But if I didn't have that, oh my gosh, it would be horrible. Because I do remember that one thing. And like I said, once you make those mistakes, you never make them again. Yeah. So I think that was the worst thing that ever happened.
Here's a technical question. This is specifically for me because I've never been brave enough to try this. But the making stars using the toothbrush with the white, like, have you done that? And it's just basically running your thumb over a toothbrush and
for
that star effect.
Yeah, there's kind of a key to, like, it's like a mixture. It's like a water to acrylic paint mixture. So and then the brush too. So you know how like there's fine toothbrushes, and then there's the more coarse ones or more like rigid ones. So if you're going to do a star filled, don't use one of the smooth toothbrushes, because it'll be like a really fine kind of powdery texture.
Too thin or too small.
Yeah, almost like it's a smooth kind of even like spatter texture.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want more like irregular, but you want dots, then you got to kind of trust it, because also, how I was talking about bringing the ink over the board. There's one thing about bringing a toothbrush fully loaded with white paint. It'll do the same thing. So, but the thing is, when you're doing a star filled, you need a lot of paint on the brush.
Yeah.
Because that's how it makes the big stars, right? Otherwise, it just make a bunch of little fine ones. So you need it really wet, and you need a lot of it. So sometimes if I'm really nervous about it, let me see, I'll show you and see if I can do it. Like, say here's the page right here. Mm-hmm. I'll bring the toothbrush over with a sheet of paper, and then I'll reveal it, and then I'll just do it. Or I'll still keep the paper around where I don't want it to whack, And then sometimes I'll use Post-its, so I'll like mask it off around it, so I don't, like, if there's a figure in the middle of the star filled, I'll kind of do like some quick like masking down with Post-its, and then I'll spatter around it. But the thing is, when you're doing a star filled, you can always paint black over it and do it again.
Yeah.
The problem is sometimes, like, when you do, like, let's say somebody's launching into like debris, like the Hulk is landing into a bunch of debris and there's dirt and everything flying in the air, and you want to spatter like the impact, of his feet hitting the ground. That gets a little touchier because you're going over like real inked lines. It's not just a solid black. You're going over stuff that took you hours to ink. You know what I mean? So if you obliterate it or you screw that up, you're done.
That's why that stuff always makes me just a little bit too nervous.
It is a little nerve-wracking. And the thing to do as well is just try it out first. Like,
practice.
Yeah, just practice on the side, and then you'll get a kind of an idea of like the mixture, because it does kind of come down to the mixture of water to acrylic white paint, of what you're going to be able to do. And then the brush, I guess, density, like if it's soft or harder. Yeah. The toothbrush, that is. Yeah.
More technical questions.
Wait.
Oh, well, yeah.
This is question 20.
Question 20.
Yeah, we're heating it up, man.
Yes, we are. So I know with inkers and especially with the original art, people get a little weird about this, but Sharpies and Microns, do you use them? Are you against them? You guys, I thought I'd seen one right there. And I know with original art, people don't necessarily like Sharpies, but
I got this. This is not like your cool collectible case, but it is like those magnetic ones.
Oh yeah.
So San Diego Con had the badges in here, I guess last year, the year before. So I have
nice
all.
pen case. Oh, I've got a box of Microns like that.
Yeah, so I kind of have them all stashed. I don't use them a lot. I mostly use them in layouts. So when I'm just doing layouts, because I still like to pencil my layouts and ink them. I don't know why. It just, like I said earlier, like just the sense of being finished. And also I just think my eye responds to a black line more than a pencil. And maybe it's just the years of training, you know what I mean? But I'll ink almost all my layouts. I don't keep them in penciled state. So I usually use them for that. Or if something's very technical, you know, like I'm inking something very technical, the Microns work better. So like templates, like if you're using templates,
yeah,
stuff like that.
And it keeps the same line width instead of with, yeah.
Right, and a crow quill's a little hard to, you know, move around, you know, templates and stuff like that. So yeah, I use them mostly for technical stuff or things that are really, really small. Because some of those Microns, what are those 001s or whatever the hell they are? They're really, really fine. So if you're like doing like, you know, like a face or like fine detail, they're really good for that too.
Yeah, definitely. Zipatone. Have you ever used Zipatone very much? And I was going to say, is it a pain in the neck?
Well, I came from the world of illustration. So one of my early jobs is I worked assisting this guy named Corey Wolf, and Corey was probably the most in-demand movie poster and Hollywood promotion guy that's ever worked, an advertising guy, but you never saw his work. You've never seen his work. It's like I knew screenplay writers that made a killing, but never had a screenplay made. You know what I mean? Like they were like demo guys. Like they would, like this guy would bang out a bunch of movie posters. Like we did stuff for Disney, like Snow White when they were re-releasing for the Blu-ray or this was actually like the tapes, like the tapes.
Oh, yeah, the VHS tapes. Okay.
VHS tapes. And so we did a series of 3 different illustrations for Snow White, and they didn't use any of them. And so what my job was, is it was called frisk it. Like, so when you airbrush, you have to mask everything off. So it's like Zipatone. It's like a clear piece of plastic. You put it over the art, and then you get an X-Acto and you trace.
Yeah.
And then you pull out what you want painted. So it's basically masking off areas so that overspray of the airbrush doesn't hit. It's a pain.
Yeah, it always looks.
These guys have no idea like how much easier it is to do stuff these days.
Oh yeah.
So my job was kind of masking off the artwork because that was the most time-consuming thing.
Sure.
You know, so when it came to time to use Zipatone, it felt just like an extension of that. Yeah. So I used it quite a bit. And also in the early days, it was mostly black and white line art. Like color didn't really have too much of an impact on comics. It was mostly like the inks. The inks kind of were everything when you did a comic, because the coloring was just kind of flat.
You guys created where the light was coming from and everything, basically.
Yeah, so if you could add a dimension to your work with Zipatone, then that was great. So, you know, there was texture Zipatone that you could put on walls or rocks. There was like patterns that you could put on clothing, you know, on ties. There was all kinds of different stuff. And then I do remember that when I was working in the Superman office, we had like DC made up like Zipatone, but they were like Lex Luthor. They were like logos. So we put them on tech. So it would be like LexCorp, like tech, like they were like little pill-off stickers, and you could put them on the artwork.
Save the letter somewhere.
Well, yeah, and also like if you wanted like a computer, like you had to draw.
Oh, sure.
You could put a little LexCorp, logo in the corner, so it looked like it was made by Lex Luthor. Anything that kind of made sense, you know what I mean? Like you didn't want to put it on stuff that didn't. And if you look at some of that old Jim Lee stuff, I think there's one of the characters is stepping out of a car. So sometimes they put logos on like the side of cars or by the door, by the fender right there. I put a LexCorp.
I remember that. It was awesome. Really? Yeah. Oh yeah, I remember that. It was awesome. Like, look what they did here. Like, as a fan, you always love little Easter eggs like that kind of poke fun and stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're on 22, so we got 8 more if we're going to do 30 for this show.
Yep, we're winding down there. So Hack Shack Studios, that's you. And you had inkers that you brought up through Hack Shack Studios.
Right.
You had, it's kind of a who's who of inkers today that have kind of come through there. Can you maybe talk about how guys came in, how that kind of worked and who's gone on to bigger and things like that?
Yeah, I'm very proud of this studio, and I always think like this is. I say to my wife, I'm a very crude guy. Like this is me putting, but it's like shit in, shit out, right? Like you don't want your legacy to be like all these horrible assistants that went out into the mainstream, and there are some. I'm not going to name them that work with other people.
That'll get the show really spiced up. These are the guys who suck.
I've had some of them ink me in the past. No, I'm not gonna go there. But
that'll be a late night show once we've had a couple.
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, then we'll loosen up and loose lips. We'll see some ships. So, yeah. So the thing is, I don't know if it was intentional or just the way things happen, but one, just like having a good eye for people, giving them an opportunity to shine, giving them the skills that maybe they need to hone that, to get to that point. And so that was always the thing. So the first person that came on as an assistant was Trevor Scott. And Trevor Scott was the first inker hire at Wildstorm. It was Homage at the time. So Jim Lee, that was his go-to. And so then, there was this guy named, what was his name? Owen something. I can't remember his name now, but he came in and he worked with us, but for a short period of time. So there were guys like that were talented that never really had aspirations or went on to anything bigger. But then I met Danny Mickey, and Mickey came in. And so, I always tell everybody it's like a ladder. So here's the first rung, master that, then the next rung. So then what I do is I compartmentalize everything. So then all you have to do is master these little pieces. You know what I mean? And before you know it, you're going to be way up here. And so, because things can get overwhelming. And also if I can compartmentalize, I can get work out of these guys quicker. You know what I mean? So if it's inking borders, then if you can do that, then that's what you're going to do. And once you master that or get that down, then you're going to be doing blacks and then so on and so forth. Yeah. So that everything had like a price breakdown, you know what I mean, as well. So if you did this, that's how much you would make. If you did this, this is how much it'd make. So also there was a way to better yourself and make more money. So
and for them, they can see,
right.
What the next step is and how to get.
And then they're working right next to the guy that is that next step or 5 steps, already beyond that. So it just seemed like it was common sense the way to structure it. So it just kind of happened organically. And so, one time there was Trevor and then there was Danny working in the same office. And then Danny became, the first hire for when Rob, did Extreme Studios. Mm-hmm. So, and then of course, Danny went on to Spawn fame, and just exploded as soon as he got out of that look that he was trained to do. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? From Hack Shack. So he kind of reinvented himself and then, made history. And so then there's like Tim Townsend, who worked on some Spawn stuff. We brought him in and he assisted on those issues. There's Marlo Aquesa, went on to DC fame. Larry Stucker, who was inking Todd Knock on a lot of stuff over at DC. Jaime Mendoza. There's a bunch of guys. There's Andy Owens, who inked Scott McDaniels on a lot of work. So there's a lot of people that came out of the studio. So I'm really, really proud of that legacy. Like I said, it's like, quality in, quality out. It's whatever. It's how much work you want to and how much pride you have in what you do. So I'm really thankful that it all worked out that way, so I can look back and go, oh my God.
It's always nice when it's successful and you can look back.
You don't want to hang your head.
Reminisce about, remember that time you screwed up really bad and it all blew up in your face.
Exactly, yeah. Oh, well, that's what Art taught me to do. He always said shit in, shit out.
Yeah.
No, he didn't.
Blame it on Art.
Yeah.
So a question about both Black and White and Chrono Mechanics. I'm always interested in like artistic influence and, certain artists you can like definitely see who their influences are. And obviously Black and White is more of a traditional superhero look. And then Chrono Mechanics kind of has that more cartoony look. Can you kind of talk about your influences and those two different styles and, kind of, maybe where your style development came from?
Well, that's actually a great question. I'll try to keep it under 20 or what it was.
Yeah, I can listen to this stuff all day, so I'm not hitting the 2-minute timer on this one because I love listening to art influences.
So I think there were a lot of things, and so there are guys that had decades worth of a career. So I always wanted to be that guy. I wanted to be that guy that had a long career. I didn't want to just be a flash in the pan kind of thing. So I'm a music guy. So there were people like David Bowie that like every maybe 5, 6, 8 years, he would kind of redefine himself. So he actually had characters that he created, and then that would be what that next either sound would be or sound and visual, this whole kind of presentation that he would do. And so I remember having an early conversation with Jim Lee, and we were watching. It was really sad. We were at a convention, and there was a guy kind of sitting there, and he was outside of the party. And this guy was a really influential artist 10 years ago. You know what I mean? And I don't want to name names. And so we looked at him, and then we were like, oh my gosh, that's what the industry does. The industry is going to use you up and spit you out. And so then we were like, I think we were just kind of like, we're never going to let that happen to us, And so one of the things we talked about is like style defining you. So let's just say that, I mean, Jim even redefined himself a little bit since the 90s, and Scott did as well. So they owned it, but they kind of still owned it, but they kind of owned their original style and then went, and kind of recreated it. So they didn't kind of lock into the exact same thing. But and I've been asked this question, why don't you work like that anymore, like the 90s stuff? And it's because I didn't want that to be all that I contributed. I didn't want that to be everything. So, I also thought, like, if I was going to have a 40-year career, which I'm close to having,
I was going to say,
yeah, I think I'm a year away from it, is to change things up. So I thought what was one of the coolest things is I started doing conventions maybe 3 years ago when my daughter got old enough that I felt I could leave the house. Maybe it was like 5 or 6 years ago now. And so there would be people when I have conversations, they didn't know what I looked like. And so they always thought like I was a contemporary guy. They thought I had just come out of the woodwork because a lot of new people reading comics didn't know the 80s or the 90s stuff. So then I always took that as a compliment. I was like, I'm kind of staying contemporary. I'm in step with what's happening. And I've always been a style guy. Like I like style within comics. I don't like guys that don't have an impact. Like, there are a lot of good workhorses in the industry, and nothing against them, but I like the Kevin Nolans. I like the Art Adams. I like the Neil Adams. I like, the George Perez's. I like those guys that, like Walter Simonson, like, that just Bernie Wrightson, that just come in and they just write their own tickets. You know what I mean? Like,
oh yeah,
where the source came from, what their influences were, but they just go in this completely different direction. And so, that's what I always kind of wanted to do. So when I inked a job, sometimes I would kind of invent a look over the pencils, like the Carlos Pacheco thing that I mentioned earlier. One of the reasons I like that so much is because I didn't ink him kind of the way he penciled it. I went against the grain, and I thought, like, for a contemporary, to make it look contemporary, to make it do what I thought it needed to do, which I thought X-Men always needed to have something new, something fresh, something different, that's what I was going to do, because I knew he wanted to be inked like Alan Davis. Like, he's kind of from the Alan, like Mark Farmer, or like Paul Neary kind of, style.
Real smooth, flowy.
Yeah, real brushy, kind of feathery look. And I just didn't want to do that because I didn't think it looked contemporary. Nothing against those guys, but I just didn't think it was, for this book. And so, that's what I would do. So, then when, independent stuff came up, like Chrono Mechanics or Black and White, I just didn't want to work like that. I wanted to try to do something completely different. And so there were always, like, the European guys, like the French guys that I liked. I liked that style. But the thing about working for the mainstream is it's hard to plug in what you want to do creatively and personally to another person's style. You know what I mean? And that's also why I don't work with Carlos, because Carlos liked, on one hand, what I was doing with the inks on X-Men, but at the same time, it wasn't his vision. You know what I mean? I don't think it was ego. I think it was more like, he wanted something different. So then what was it? Marino, I forget his first name, came in and started working with him, and it looked cool, but it just wasn't. I can't remember his first name.
Jesus Marino, maybe.
Yeah. Came in and knocked it out of the ballpark, but it wasn't, what we were doing. So then, when you're penciling your own stuff, you don't have to worry about those things. You can just do it. And so then I just did it. I just was playing around with style, and the industry, the mainstream industry, Marvel, had turned its back on me. They fired me, told me I never worked there again. So I left comics for 2 years, and I always liked animation, so I just started working, in an animated style, looking at those guys, and then bringing some of those other comic book influences in, and then that led to, the Chrono style, and then even Black and White. In the 90s, I was trying to kind of, in my own way, do what the 90s was, but then try to bring more organic approaches to things. There was a lot of brushwork and things that I wasn't doing, when I was working on X-Men. So, and then the newest version of Black and White is kind of a hybrid of all of those things, and then the newest issue, the volume 2 that I'm working on now, is going to even go beyond that. I like to evolve. I know that maybe
pushing it.
Yeah, some people are like, well, either they complain like it looks the same all the time, or that it varies too much. But I think I would rather be that guy that varies and keeps people on their toes than the guy that stagnates and gives them the same thing each and every time.
Sure. Yeah. All right. So let's see where we're at on questions.
Question 24.
Well, I think we've gotten through a lot of my questions, because some of the ones you answered early on, and you answered multiple questions in one answer.
Yeah.
You answered that you did work out. So when you said you worked out of Homage Studios for Wildstorm, did you actually move down to San Diego for a while to do that, or were you just working on books through that studio?
No, I was living in the South Bay, which is like the LA beaches. And so then my wife and I moved into Orange County. We bought a house. And so now we were really close to Extreme Studios.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were maybe an hour and a half away from the new Homage Studios, which is like the gym was going for. Well, it wasn't.
That wasn't La Jolla yet?
Storm. Yeah, in La Jolla.
Okay.
There's the 15 freeway that has, well, it used to never have any traffic on it. So I could just zip down, that way and then go hang out for a day and then, come back. But even when I was working the South Bay, I had a little studio. Wills would come, he would drive all the way from San Diego to LA. And we would work the day. Usually if it was a deadline bind, like we were at crunch time, we would work like all night or something like that, in the studio together. Jim never did. Jim would come down and hang out, but we never worked out of Hack Shack Studios. I do remember, I think before the La Jolla offices, they were renting an apartment. And so it was Jim, Wills, Scott, I think Carl Alstetter, and maybe Joe Chito. And so they all kind of shared an apartment. And so the living room was basically the studio. And I think Joe lived there. Joe Chito lived there. So there was like a 2-bedroom. So Joe had a bedroom kind of thing in the apartment. And so I went up there and I would work, every once. I think I did it maybe 3 or 4 times. Went there, had lunch with them and hung out and did work.
That's cool. Let's see. Favorite project you worked on. I think that's a relationship between you and Scott Williams. You both famously inked Jim Lee. You've mentioned Scott a few times, but you guys are both known for those early X-Men days because those are like really famous books. And maybe just other, creators you worked with in general. It's always interesting to hear, like like with anybody, you become friends with certain people, your rivals. Sometimes you're like more competitive. That kind of those days with creators and the competition and, working on these books and whose book is going to be bigger. Maybe talk about that aspect because everybody's got their own ego and their own creations and stuff. You want to be the best. Maybe talk about the competitive nature of just being a creator and working with other comic book creators like that.
One thing I think pre-big money, like later Marvel and then early Image Comics, there wasn't any money in it. So most of us were relatively humble, and the industry was kind of more friendly, I guess I could say, because there was no money in it, and we were all doing it for mostly the love of the art form. So we had fun. You know what I mean? Like if we're not going to get paid a bunch of money, we're doing funny books, may as well have fun. So the thing is, I don't remember any competition, and friendly competition, other than like, ooh, Scott just did this, I'm going to do this. Or I would do something and Scott would ask me, how did you do this? So it was more of like trying to top each other in a friendly way, because I don't ever remember any kind of animosity. I still have no animosity towards any of those guys. And I don't remember ever getting into any kind of argument or disagreement with anything, with any of those 3 guys. Wills was probably the most opinionated when it came to the work, but he was a sweet guy. But the thing is, he was a taskmaster, but he also like helped me out. Like there was a lot of things that I learned, when you're around a guy like that, you can take offense to it, or you could go, this opportunity to learn. So when he would give me those things, it'd be very direct, wouldn't be bullshitty or taking my feelings in consideration. There was never any time anyways, you know what I mean? And I never did it, on top of that. So yeah, we would just kind of work out problems, move forward. And the thing is, I always felt like Will's wasn't 100% happy with what I did. I think he always liked Scott more, but it never bugged me because
there's just preferences sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was always work. It wasn't like there wasn't anything to do. You know what I mean? There was never any time to go, oh, that's, whatever. So because you knew like deadline bind the next month, you were going to be inking Wills again. You know what I mean? It wasn't really going to matter. It wasn't going to be in stone. But the thing I did like about working with Jim is I never had any conversations creatively with Jim. Jim was just like, do what you do.
Hand off the pages and go to town.
Right. And you would think like somebody like him would be like very territorial, you know what I mean? Because it's got such a look.
Right.
But he never did. And I think that there was just early on, there was like when he came up, I was coming up at the same time. I predate him a little bit, but all of our influences were real similar. So then we were kind of from the same school, and those influences were on our sleeve when we were doing it. You know what I mean? Like when you look at early Jim Lee, or you look at some of the evolution, like I think like when you look at my Superman run on Dan Jurgens, you can kind of see, oh, he's looking at this. Oh, he's looking at that. Oh, the Japanese stuff. He's bringing some of those Akira lines. That's what we were calling them at the time, those speed lines and stuff like that into the work. I was doing that stuff independent of what Jim and Wills were doing. You know what I mean? So then when it came together, all those influences and everything were already there. So it just kind of fit. You know what I mean? Like it was just kind of organically just worked.
Yeah, no, it kind of sounds like all this kind of meshed together just as you guys are kind of a lot of things coming together to turn into something really nice. And
it was a moment in time, like things like sometimes they just happen, and then you have to learn to kind of get out of the way and ride that crest. Like I do think CG right now is one of those moments in time.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's always kind of fun to see, like when something, it doesn't happen all the time. So when something like that does, sometimes you just got to sit back and enjoy it, and play as much a part of it as you can. So
yeah, and I think that you and Mark Polton are definitely doing that. Like you have your second book right now, Sea Dog and Kill Switch, and so you guys aren't messing around. Here's the second book. Here's the third book. You just boom, boom, boom.
Oh yeah, we're gonna keep churning stuff out. I mean, I the one thing that can hurt is fans waiting for these books. When they're excited about the books, you want to get them the next one as soon as possible. So it's just kind of that mentality of do the work, turn it out, do your best work, and get the book out to the fans as quick as possible. Definitely.
Yeah, let me read this one because I think it's hilarious. Black and white 2 chisel stone tablet hieroglyphics variant cover. That's not a bad idea.
You're gonna have to charge through the nose for shipping though, because that's gonna be heavy as hell.
Yeah, they're gonna be one-offs unless I can make a master mold and somehow mold those things.
No doubt. That would be one of a kind, I would think.
Well, you know what, Clint? I'm not going to put you on the spot for question, I guess, 26.
We didn't get through 30. I feel bad we didn't get through 30, but I think you answered multiple questions in some of the answers, and I think what happened.
Yeah. I kind of beat you to some of the questions, but man, this was a blast, and I 6 questions, my friend. That's pretty impressive.
No, that was cool. It was fun. There's a lot of stuff that fun stuff to talk about. Definitely.
Yeah. Comics are fun. This is what it's all about. This is like hanging out with you is very reminiscent of like no walls, no pretense, just hanging out, having a good time, talking about comic books, and celebrating the art form. Because realistically, like I do remember having an argument. This was a few years back with an editor at DC, and he was just very militant, like do it this way, like just very like. And I just told him, I said, listen, man, I said, you don't pay me enough to be this uptight. I said, if I can't have fun doing it, then it's not worth it. And I told him flat out, I said, I could do advertising right now and make 3 times the amount of money just starting out. And he's like, no, you could. I go, I've done advertising. I've done it. I have contacts at Famous Frames right now. I can just pick up the phone and I can call those guys and I can draw refrigerators for 3 times the amount that you're going to pay me for this entire book. You know what I mean? So that's that. The reason I do this is because I love it. The reason I do this is because it's fun. You know what I mean? And that's it. You know, because I could take my artwork other places, my skills other places, and make more money, but it would destroy my soul. Like if I couldn't tell these stories and I couldn't draw comics, I would just be the angriest person. I would have a castle, right? I would have all this stuff, but you know what? I would just be grumpy all the time.
Oh no, I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah, definitely. So, oh wait. Okay.
Comics should be fun. Working on them should be fun.
Yeah, Art's first job was the Stone Wheel. Well, you know what? The word had to get out there. You know, we had to get the word out. But you know what? The thing is, they were all originals, so I couldn't really put out a lot of advertising. So they were all one-offs. They were all one-offs back then until that printing press was created, and then that changed everything. Let's see what Andino says. Art said, listen, man, I'll break your kneecap. I've never said that to anybody. I wish I could. Could you imagine, Clint, if you could talk to somebody like that?
It doesn't always go well. Depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, because most of the time, those people that I threaten, they could kick my ass. Either that or have power over me and could destroy me.
Oh, there's Eric Hammond says, is Fraga in the hospital?
Yeah, he's got another kidney stone. They were monitoring it, but
no, okay,
and caused some trouble. My wife had one of those some years back. They're
terribly painful.
They are horrible. There's not enough morphine in the world to actually.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, so he's going through that now. So let's send some well wishes. Way, for sure. Definitely a good guy. So wait. Steranko talks to people like that. I think Steranko is a mobster.
Yeah, he's always kind of had that attitude. I haven't seen a ton, but any interview with him, he's kind of there's a real edge to him.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's a follow up. Steranko is ready to throw people out of Marvel windows. I've been pretty angry, but never that angry that I would want to kill somebody.
That seems a little harsh.
Yeah, it seems a little extreme. I'm gonna kill you. Read. Yeah.
Redraw what?
No. I always thought, like, when people go, I got to redraw, I go, in the old days anyways, they would pay you to redraw.
Oh.
So I go, well, you're going to pay me more money, I'll do it.
That's different.
The modern day comics, they don't.
No, there's no extra money for nothing.
So that's where I do kind of get Steranko, and it's probably just the older, me talking to the younger editors. And if they ask me to do something, all I say is like, how much do I get paid? And then they're like, maybe we can get somebody else to do it. And I go, yeah, that's what I thought.
Well, there's a question that just popped in my head. I mean, with your career, you started out with editors older than you, more experienced than you, and then throughout your career, you were probably definitely working with a lot of editors who are much younger than you, much less knowledgeable about comics in general than you. Like, maybe just a little bit about that. Yeah,
I never had a problem with any of them. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Male, female. Also, by the way, I like to say this a lot. This whole belief that women aren't represented in comics and stuff, that's complete and utter bullshit. I have worked with just as many female editors, assistant editors, as I have female editors as I have male. It just doesn't exist. When I was working at DC Comics, when I broke well, actually, it was a little bit. No, when I did break into comics, Jeanette Kahn was the person that ran DC Comics. Like she was. You don't get any, higher up than she was. That's a very powerful woman. Karen Berger ran Vertigo. I never had a problem with any of these people, young, old, or whatever. Only when they would try to do like power trip me, or to try to get me to do something that intuitively wasn't right.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or try to bullshit me or trick me into doing something. Early days, I did it because I didn't know any better. But as I got older, I would call them on it. So where I do feel bad for the current editors at DC, I don't know how they are at Marvel. I imagine it's even worse at Marvel. It's just they don't have any power. Like it's all kind of like they're just they were always middle management, but they had power to make decisions over their books. Like if you ask them a question, they could answer it quickly, and then you could move on. Now, a lot of times it's like, I got to check with somebody. I'll get back to you, those type of things. And it's not that they can't do their job. I just don't think they're allowed to do their job.
They're more just in place to manage, to make sure that all deadlines are hit, the book comes out. But like creative decisions are coming from above, and they're just there to make sure that those creative decisions are done the right way.
Yeah, they're micromanaged to the nth degree. Some editors more so than others, but their hands are really tied. And it makes it hard to put out a comic book like that.
Yeah, and I'm sure it makes it way less fun too. I mean, for the most people, you want to work in comics for the fun part of it, the creative part of it. And then when all that creativity is taken out of your job, it probably is kind of a drag.
Yeah, and that's the worst. Like I said, if you take the fun element out of what we do, the money just isn't good enough. I mean, it can be at moments. I have been very, very, very.
Most people are doing this for the love of comics.
But most people. Whenever I see that, I think what was it? Sean Gordon Murphy. I actually applauded him for doing this, where he was putting out page rates. He was making them very public, and he was saying, like, independently speaking, this is kind of what you would get if you work for this independent publisher or this independent publisher, and then mainstream entry level, this is probably what you would get. And then, add a couple, once you're established, this is how much you would make as well. And I do think that that's important for people to know going into these things, because if you were a career-minded person and went to work at Google or wherever, you kind of have this like trajectory of where you can go within the corporate ladder. In comic books, they kind of keep you in the dark. They don't want you to know those things, because they don't want anybody clearly knowing what this other guy is making. Then that person's going to get disgruntled and ask for that. And then as soon as he meets that rate, then the guy that has the high rate is going to go, well, I'm better than that guy. I should make some more, more money than that, and so on and so forth. And they just really don't want to get into that whole.
No, in fact, if anything, from everything I've heard the last few years, it's gone in the opposite direction, where, page rates have dropped, drastically compared to where they were just even a few years ago.
And I think that that's probably a what do you call that? Taking advanced action to maybe just nip it in the bud. You know what I mean? Because like if you can beat people down, like you can just instill fear into them, then they're not going to really be cocky and go, well, last year people were making this amount. Why is this happening? So they're going to be afraid to ask for the money, because also a lot of those people that are making more money are being phased out or take a page rate, decrease. And those stories get out, but not.
Yeah, and that spreads, and then it's like, I'm not going to ask for more money. I'm just lucky to have a job. Kind of, you build that mentality into people, and that'll take any incentive to ask for a raise out real quick.
But this is like, I know we're getting, Okay, I just got to let everybody know. All right, the questions and answer thing, we're done with that. Now Clint and I are just hanging out.
This is just BS.
Yeah, this is us hanging out. But this is my theory about the page rate thing, is if you start paying people more as a company or as a corporation, then the pressure gets put on you, which is where it should be, to make more money, to sell more product, to pay for that talent. Because in the day, Image and even Marvel and around that like 90s, like early mid 90s, you saw an illustrative boom in the industry because those guys were getting paid money. You were attracting people that you never would have attracted into this industry because they could make some serious money.
Yeah.
Right. So not everybody's motivated that way, but overall, you could attract more people that way if you were paying really, really good money, or you would incentivize people that have the potential to get better, that are already working for you, to reach for that brass ring. Like in the day, the X-Men were that. Like for me, that was the destination. These other books weren't going to pay you that much. So how you did it is you honed your craft, you got really good, and then you were asked to play at the big kid or eat at the big kids table.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's how you did it. You worked towards royalty books. You earned your mark because they knew that you were going to sell books for them, and that's what they wanted. So the IP did so much, but then the artist did, took it, from there. And so the thing is, I always thought it was short-sighted for these companies to do this BS anyway. It's like, no, now the pressure's on you. You pay me $300 a page. Now you have to make that book sell enough to pay me that. And to be honest, even $300 a page isn't really that much when you think we're putting 10 to 12 hours per page in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That would be, if this was a normal job, that would be overtime. And if we were full-time employees, there would be some kind of medical benefits and things like that, which you're not paying either. So you're getting away with freaking murder.
It's you get into the details of what freelance creators do for comic book companies and how they get paid compared to any other industry out there. Basically, it's you scratch your head a little bit.
Yeah, and so then you take the element of fun out of it.
Yeah.
What the hell are we getting?
There's not a lot of reason to do it.
If it's not fun to draw Spider-Man, then why the hell?
Exactly.
I could draw refrigerators. Damn it.
Yeah, that's the thing is, there's easier ways to make money, just not as fun of ways. So
right.
Yeah.
I did a job for Porsche, advertising job, drawing seat belts and bucket seats. I kid you not. I made more in a day than I did for an entire month in the comics industry. I'm not even kidding. It's insane. It's absurd how little comic book artists are paid and how much they're putting into it. You think about it, it's at least 6 individual compositions per page that all have to interact. They're just not at the top of your head.
Yeah. No, not just static figures standing around. Like there's something going on,
and they all have to correlate. They all have to relate, and they all have to tell a story, an ongoing story. These are skills. This is a craft that is so specialized. And if you think about any other profession that's specialized, I was talking to Billy Tucci about his son. He's a welder, and then I brought up, because he brought up like oil, like. Those guys that go out on oil, like those oil platforms, those guys get paid more money. And then I said, combine that with undersea, like if that guy could weld underwater, those guys get paid crazy amounts because it's specialized. So every other business, the more specialized, the more money you make. Comics is that way.
No.
Like I think like inkers, there's only really one place in current day art form that inking exists as an art form, and that's comic books. Like in the day, animation would be inked,
Right.
or coloring books would be inked, or advertising, like newspaper advertisement, would be inked because it was on cheap paper and it could stand up against, cheap paper and bad printing. And that's why comic books were always inked as well. It was just an extension of newspaper. But at this day and age, it is so specialized. Shouldn't it be, better, I don't know, more money involved? And also what I always say is like that inking is, I think it's three things that for me define a comic book, an actual comic book. And one of the essential parts is inking. Okay, it's sequential storytelling, word balloons, and inking. So I've done advertising, you probably have too, or you're familiar with advertising that tries to do comic book type advertising. You know what I mean? Like, this is superhero, for, whatever carpet company or whatever. So they have like the pseudo character that has the emblem of whatever, like carpet, whatever. So he has a big C on his chest or whatever. And he's lifting a big,
the generic Superman looking guy with their logo on his chest.
Right. Okay. Always, if that character's saying something, form of a word balloon, right? And those illustrations are always inked or pseudo inked. You know what I mean? It might not be like a comic book guy would do it, but they might be with rapidographs or markers, but they're always in that style. That tells me that one of the main elements of a comic book or comic book art is the ink work. Even people that are working digitally are emulating the ink line. They're not doing something completely different.
No, absolutely.
Doing it, like emulating an ink line. So, these are specialized, this is specialized industry. Storytelling, I mean, there's storyboards, that's I guess the closest to comic book storytelling that's out there. It's its own beast, but even those guys get paid way more than artists do. Yeah, for sure. Well, you want to start wrapping this up, my friend?
Yeah, we can wrap it up. I can grab some lunch. I'm getting hungry, but no, this was an absolute blast. I mean, it's fun hearing these stories. It's fun learning. It's like this is stuff that you don't always get to hear about. So, getting to talk to you and pick your brain, and then just talk comics, that's always a treat.
Yeah, and just somebody that has knowledge like you do of the industry, not just as an artist, but as a fan as well. I kind of think like there's a point like, 40 years into this, I became less of a fan, like you become more of kind of like a professional. So it's fun to talk to somebody that, especially like if it's stuff that I had done in the past, that remembers it. So then it's a real weird experience where you have somebody talking fondly about something that you drew and that I've never heard. I don't get to hear people talk about it much like that. You know what I mean? Like, this meant this to me, or this story was good, this and that and the other thing. And so I think at this point in my life, I relish it. It's just amazing because you work in a vacuum. Like, you don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Like everything you're doing right now, Clint. I mean, we're kind of at a different place because we get to interact with the chat. But, like early on in your career, you didn't get much feedback.
You sat in your room and you drew, then you'd get emails. and every once in a while there'd be somebody you talk to on the phone. But yeah, drawing comics is a very solitary work environment for the most part. Sometimes you work in a studio, but for the most part, you're just sitting in your room by yourself drawing.
Yeah, and the editors really, if there's good like letters that are coming in, they're usually not going to tell you because they don't want you to get an inflated sense of self. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So they always want to kind of keep you humble,
Yep.
They keep you down. All right, my friend. Well, I want to get one last plug. CDawg and codename Killswitch is, are you in demand right now? Or are you still?
No, we've got 2 weeks left on our main campaign. So 2 weeks left for CDawg and codename Killswitch. So probably I think around March 15th, we're closing it down. So we'll probably do some sort of big closeout blowout in YouTube. But yeah, we're almost at our 15,000 stretch goal where everybody gets the neon and Rebel swimsuit print. So hopefully everybody today can at least go give it a look and check it out. It's kind of all sorts of 90s action superhero comics goodness. Me and Mark kind of wanted to create a throwback to the fun comics that we loved and grew up on. And just a lot of superhero fun. And, of course, Sea Dog. You don't want to miss out on Sea Dog.
Well, this story actually centers on Sea Dog. So.
Yep. Yeah, they're rescuing Sea Dog's master, and codename Killswitch is joining to track him down.
Yeah, and how could you not want to pick up a book with a character named Crotch Rocket?
Crotch Rocket. See, Crotch Rocket is kind of my personal favorite. So Crotch Rocket has a trans-dimensional warp bike, and he came from the future to save the world. So his catchphrase is "Get some more Crotch Rocket in your face." So
in your face.
Exactly. He is one of my proudest creations.
He came from your loins. All right, I'm going to leave on this because this is pretty cool. Thank you so much, Unchained Spirit. I just got back. Thanks for the stream art. Always fun to hear some stories and some history from people. Yeah, well, you know what? It's all Clint, because Clint dragged it all out of me. So thank you, Clint, for letting me go down memory lane and reliving the stuff. The questions were awesome. Maybe we'll have a part 2 because I had a ball. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, all right.
No, it's a blast.
Yeah, in the chat, let us know if you want another like a million questions. Maybe Clint and I will eventually get to that 1 million mark. And in the meantime, go ahead.
No, we'll just keep adding them up. It'll hit 1 million eventually.
Yeah. So let's just round it to about 25. We got 25. And and make sure you go back, Killswitch and Sea Dog. It looks amazing. There's 2 weeks left, and I am going to go get some lunch as well. So thanks for hanging, everyone, and we'll talk.